There was a civil war within Disney, but that is long since over and the good guys lost. This is why all Disney is currently capable of producing is subversive, hyper-partisan propaganda that causes audiences around the world to recoil. The only hope Disney has now is direct shareholder intervention in the guise of Nelson Peltz. But that is still in the future. Let's travel back to the past and the beginnings of the Disney Civil War. Following the release of Wish, the movie which was meant to celebrate 100 years of Disney, but which in the end only served to demonstrate how far the company has fallen under Bob Iger, film threats Chris Gore and Alan Ng were contacted by a number of current and former Disney staffers. These revealed the true inside stories from within the House of Mouse, and what they revealed demonstrate that sometimes truth is not only stranger than fiction, but also more horrific. Chris Gore has shared some of these stories with us already on the Midnight's Edge in the Morning live streams. In the description you will find links to clips of these discussions. Alan Ng, meanwhile, proceeded to document these stories in a series of feature articles on Film Thread called The D-Files, and in part 1 he covers the downfall of John Lasseter. The civil war within Disney had been gradually building and brewing for years already, of course, but the firing of John Lasseter was the singular event which ignited matters. Let's go through the highlights of this first article, which documents the fall of John Lasseter, the heart and soul of Pixar, the studio that shot to fame with Toy Story back in 1995. Incidentally, Toy Story also got a fantastic adaptation on the Sega Mega Drive, one that pushed the system to its very limits, and even rivaled early releases on the PlayStation 1. So, without further ado, let's get into the highlights of the article. Alan Ng writes, "Our story begins with a single event, not so long ago, that fundamentally changed the company culturally and creatively. This event served as the catalyst for the inevitable creative and financial collapse of the company that Walt Disney started 100 years ago. As Elon Musk surmised, Walt Disney is spinning in his grave like a drill bit. That single event was the removal of Disney's chief creative officer, John Lasseter. Any Disney fan knows the impact of Lasseter's creative influence on the company. Along with founder Steve Jobs, Lasseter's groundbreaking work at Pixar gave birth to the computer-generated animated feature industry as we know it today. After the release of Toy Story, he was thrust into the public eye as the bright future of Disney. Through his guidance at Pixar, innovations in animation quickly eclipsed the legacy set by the initial Disney savior and CEO, Michael Eisner. Alan Ng even dare say John Lasseter was poised to become the next Walt Disney as the creative demigod and public face of the company. Let me repeat what Alan Ng wrote there one more time. John Lasseter was poised to become the next Walt Disney as the creative demigod and public face of the company. Keep that in mind, because I think it's going to be important later on. For now though, on with the article. In 2006, one of Iger's first steps as CEO was the $7.4 billion purchase of Pixar, making John Lasseter Disney's chief creative officer. The merger put Lasseter in charge of overseeing multiple aspects of the company, primarily Pixar and Disney Animation. But who is John Lasseter the man? Film Threat sources described him as two different people. In speaking to current and former Disney Pixar Animation employees, support staff and outside independent contractors, the consensus was that Lasseter was a joy to work with. Disney fans saw him as a father figure. He worked hard to create an environment where everyone felt like family and looked forward to coming to work each day. But like a father, John Lasseter was a perfectionist. His insistence on absolute perfection was notorious for everyone who worked for him, meaning everyone. Alan Ng was told numerous stories of his almost stone-cold criticisms of their creative choices. When presenting one's ideas to Lasseter, all emotion would drain from his body, and he would matter-of-factly tell you why your idea sucked, and then tell you how to make it better. Many who understood John Lasseter saw this as a stinging learning opportunity, yet this tough love was applied equally to all. But not everyone saw it that way. One source recounted observing a prominent figure at Pixar who had their idea derided by Lasseter and took it as a personal attack on not just their ideas, but also on them. It was apparent that to this observer, this fatherly persona of the warm and loving Lasseter was instantly dashed. What many considered Lasseter's most significant attributes soon turned into a weapon against him. Then there's the corporate ego. Maybe some within the company considered Lasseter could become a threat to his superiors, like Bob Iger. This is why I wanted you to keep Lasseter's popularity in mind. I always thought it was weird how Bob Iger was so eager to get rid of the one person on whom the success of both Pixar and Disney Animation rode. But it wouldn't be the first time a CEO of narcissistic inclinations, or a king or any other leader, put his own wants and needs first, to the detriment of those he should be serving. I mean, this is even the premise for some great work of genre culture, most notably Dune. There, the Emperor of the known universe is worried about the growing popularity of Duke Leto Atreides among the great houses of the Landsraad. Not because Leto had said or done anything wrong, but because that popularity meant that he potentially could be a challenger to the throne in the future. As it happened though, the Baron Harkonnen hated Duke Leto, so all the Emperor had to do was enable the Harkonnens to do his dirty work for him while he washed his hands of everything. Now, to be clear, there is no disgusting Baron Harkonnen in Disney, but there are plenty of disgusting activists who would serve the same purpose for Bob Iger. But we're getting ahead of ourselves, so back to Allening's article. One perceived problem Lasseter had was his penchant for hugging. Many sources saw this as a positive trait, but knew it was potentially problematic. Let's be clear, not wanting a hug is perfectly acceptable, and personal boundaries must be respected, especially in an office environment, no matter if they are perceived as harmless. Important. Film threat sources felt that this issue of personal boundaries was a significant problem and should have been addressed years earlier. It was also no secret that Lasseter liked to drink, particularly at office functions and celebrations. Several sources confirmed that alcohol was becoming a problem, to the point that Disney Corporate was forced to have handlers on standby to watch over Lasseter to avoid the mere appearance of impropriety. In October of 2017, the revelation and eventual conviction of Weinstein's crimes led to a global wave of similar allegations against prominent figures, in Hollywood known as the Weinstein effect. While the #MeToo movement rightfully exposed many sexual predators in Hollywood, several people believed the movement was used as a political and corporate weapon against specific figures. Some questioned whether targets were actual predators or political or corporate scapegoats, and how it was easier to prosecute them in public rather than in a courtroom. Like lightning in a bottle, Lasseter fell victim to the Weinstein effect. In November of 2017, it was announced that John Lasseter would take a leave of absence from Pixar and the Walt Disney Company. If this case were resolved like other harassment findings at that time, Lasseter would most likely have been forced to sign an ironclad NDA, preventing him from ever defending himself in public. It became apparent within the walls of Disney that anyone supporting Lasseter must immediately go into protection mode by keeping their questions and opinions to themselves. The office culture at the House of Mouse changed drastically overnight. Sources observed that the mood was grim, going from bad to worse. The warm family environment would never return. So, the corporate culture at Disney never returned to what it was under Lasseter. But what is more interesting is that unlike people like Harvey Weinstein, who will likely remain locked up for his crimes for the rest of his life, and unlike others who may walk free but who will never work again because no one wants to work with them, John Lasseter was hired by Skydance Animation, and what is more, many of his former Pixar colleagues like Brad Bird of The Incredibles fame and Rich Moore of Wreck-It Ralph and Zootopia fame ditched Disney to come work with him over at Skydance. Isn't that interesting? Despite being Me Too'd, people actually want to work with him and go where he is. Could there have been more to Lasseter's removal? Allening continues. Many felt that an activist faction within Disney was growing and conspiring to remove Lasseter, and his inappropriate behavior was the perfect weapon to use against him. Now it was a matter of how to frame these stories for maximum effect. So now it appeared the pieces were in place, with certain executives wanting to oust Lasseter and a growing faction within the rank and file pressing forward with a stack of allegations against him that to this day goes unprosecuted and unproven. With pressure from the top and bottom, in June of 2018, Lasseter announced that he would be leaving the company at the end of the year. One source told Film Threat that during an all-hands meeting, once the announcement was made, a female employee raised her hand and asked, "Can we have a woman run this place now?" That right there is an activist speaking. Never mind merit, never mind qualifications. The activists wanted Lasseter to be replaced by a woman, solely for ideological purposes. The article continues. The message was clear. John Lasseter left the Walt Disney Company an utter and total disgrace. Disney legend? Forget it. In fact, moves have been made within the halls of Disney to remove his legacy as if he never existed. Anything that reminded the rank and file of Lasseter was removed from plain sight. The worst part of the entire experience was the leadership vacuum created by John's absence. Film Threat sources describe life at Disney afterwards as hostile, to say the least, and this hostility spread to all of Disney's business units and brands. Cast members felt like they were constantly walking on eggshells. The mere act of casting doubt or asking questions about the allegations was met with hostility. You became a marked person, subjected to mind-numbing HR meetings and forced sensitivity training. It gets worse. Arguably, Lasseter's departure also marked the start of the steady creative decline of the Walt Disney Company. The last film he directly influenced was Pixar's Coco in 2017. Many fans believe that Coco is Pixar's crowning achievement in its prolific catalog. By the company's own admission, the creative cracks started appearing in its next feature, Cars 3, as they began applying gender-based statistical analytics to story development, i.e. counting lines of dialogue. More on this to come. Indeed, there will be more to come, and we will of course be covering it. But for now, do head on over to Film Threat and read the whole article for yourself, as I only read an abbreviated version of it. Let me know your thoughts on all of this and the beginnings of Disney's Civil War in the comments.